Hey there, it's Kyle. This is my girl right here, Susan. And so she's had an incredible story. I met her this year, and I've been cutting her hair about I think this might be our 6th or 7th time. So she came in and she has a very, specific story, like a particular story on how her hair needs to be cut. And so I wanted to kind of share her story with anyone that wants to listen or watch. And just make sure y'all tag Oprah Winfrey so that we can get Miss Susan Hardison on there. So, because her story is really, it's captivating, and I feel like it's extremely interesting on just like how people experience life sometimes. So this is Susan, this is my camera, and we're just gonna kind of go through, and I'll just kind of go through her haircut with y'all, and I'm gonna ask her some specific questions on, what we need to be doing during her haircut, and then she'll kind of tell her story and like what makes Susan so interesting. So go ahead, Susan, if you wanna take over.
Kyle, first of all, I just want to say thank you for cutting my hair and for cutting it so well that all I have to do is wake up and wash it and blow it and fluff it, and everybody gives me compliments, so thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
In 1981, I was working in a manufacturing plant. We manufactured springs and metal products, and I was working on a metal shearing machine. It had a hydraulic blade that was about 3 feet from the floor, and at the bottom of the machine there was a high-speed rotating shaft about a foot off the floor. The pieces of metal I would shear would fall to the floor and sometimes hit the bar and go to the back, sometimes to the front, and we would pick up the pieces and put them where they needed to go to the next part of the project. My partner on this project in particular went to take a break, and when she came back, I had started to pick the pieces up off the floor, and my hair was down to about my waist at the time. It was in a ponytail, and I had one of those thoughts, what if my hair fell over my shoulder? And as I thought it happened. And what happened when it fell over my shoulder was it got caught in that high-speed rotating shaft, and within a millisecond, it pulled my scalp from the base of my skull all the way to the scar right through my eyebrow, in one piece off my head. Everything. And the lady on the other side of the machine started yelling, as I probably would have too if I'd been on her side of the machine. And I looked down, and all I could see was as if somebody had turned on a spigot, but it was red water coming out. It was not water. At that point, somebody else in the shop came and started yelling directions, and then the shop manager came back, and his name was Bob, and Bob said, okay, everybody, clear out the area, go call the 911, and at that point he literally ripped his shirt off and tied my head up, I guess like a tourniquet, because I was bleeding profusely. The paramedics were there, I'm sure, in no time, and they took my scalp beside me in an ice chest to Cone Hospital in Greensboro, North Carolina, and then they transported me from there to Duke Hospital, where 3 neurosurgeons and a plastic surgeon, Dr. William Barwick, who's no longer with us, replanted my scalp in a 9.5-hour surgery. This is my beautiful hair It's all mine. I am glad of it. I believe in Mama's prayers because she was in the waiting room the entire 9.5 hours while I was in surgery, and she says that's what she was doing. This was the first successful surgery of its kind, a total scalp avulsion and replantation in the United States, and that was in 1981. And the story went down in the volumes of neurosurgery at Duke Hospital in Durham, North Carolina. And that is my story, and I'm sticking to it.
What month was it? Can you remember in 1981?
So it was actually June 11th, 1981 when it happened, and I was in intensive care for the first few days, and when I realized I was in intensive care, I started laughing because I guess I'd been drugged up, and it seemed funny that I was there. I did not remember injuring my ankle, but I knew I had a gauze on my ankle. I asked the doctor to come in, and he said, "Oh, we took a vein out of your ankle and put it under your scalp to elongate one of the 4 major arteries that you have under your temples." And so that's 2 on each side, but one of them was not long enough, and so they took a vein out of my ankle, put it under my scalp. He said I had over 500 stitches, and that the microsurgery that they did with the veins and the arteries under my scalp were with the, I think he said the thread was the size of about 1/10 of the width of a hair on your head. And that's why it was done under microscope.
And how old were you?
I was 21 at the time, and that's why when the Associated Press came into the room that night, they wanted to release a story, they had to have me sign a consent form because I was 21.
Now, when everything was going down at your workplace, what were you feeling like? Were you kind of like, almost like confused to a certain extent, where it was kind of, did you feel like the full-on pain, or, something like that? Or do you kind of go into like a shock almost?
Well, I'm sure that this is the part of the story where if you have a weak stomach, you probably want to just tune out for a minute. La 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 la. But for those of you who are strong stomach, when I looked down, I really could see blood puddling in the concrete floor in front of me. I was on my hands and knees. When the lady behind the machine started screaming, I grabbed my head, and I could see just like a spigot was turned on. And so I was thinking, my brains are still in my head because I'm still thinking, and oh no, I'm going to die right here in the floor of Southern Spring and Stamping. And I could feel 3 places. I could feel my heart pumping straight up. I could feel my jugular just pumping straight up, and I could feel the warmth of the blood just racing down my face. Because seriously, from here all the way around, 2/3 of this ear, all the way around, was completely off my head. So here's the part where I'm a recovering person. I've been in long-term recovery now for over 30 years. But at that time, thank you, at that time I was not in recovery, and I was a little bit freaking out because I had 3 hits of speed in my pocket, and I wanted to ditch them so that my mother didn't know that I had a problem with drugs when I died. So I stayed awake and alert. The manager of the shop, I said, wrap my head, and then we waited for the ambulance to get there. I remember looking up at him and him looking very pale, And I reached up and touched his face, and I said, "It's okay, Bob." And when we went to the hospital, I remember that the first thing I heard when they opened the doors of the ambulance was 10 cc's morphine. And I thought, good, I'm gonna feel better soon, but that was not the case. I didn't realize that's because I was bleeding out so quickly. Head wounds bleed profusely, and mine was totally exposed. My mother asked the surgeon who met us at the hospital, "What's covering her skull?" And he said, "Just thin mucous membranes." But he had nominated the case to go to Duke, and they had accepted it, so they got me down there. I remember that when they brought my glasses in, my glasses had flown off during the accident. They brought them in a manila envelope, and as soon as the nurse went out of the room, I reached in my pocket, threw those hits of speed in that envelope, and felt a sense of relief. And then they came back in and asked me if I would, they said they would give, if I would put my valuables in, they would give them to my mother, and I said, "I don't live with my mother." They said, "We'll give them to anybody you want." So they gave them to my roommate, who knew that what was going on. So.
Now, how long of a recovery did that, from the point of after the 9-hour procedure, right, to reattach your scalp? What was the recovery like for you? Were you in the hospital for a long period of time, or because I honestly don't remember what going on with that.
So like I said, it was a 9.5-hour surgery. It did not start until, I want to say 9 in the evening, maybe. It was, but it went on till well into the morning. When I came out of ICU, I asked the doctor, "How long am I going to be here?" And he said, "Well, we'll talk about letting you go home in a month." And I said, "A month?" Because at 21, a month was an eternity. Mm-hmm. And so I said, "What can I do to get better faster?" And he said, "Well, your body has gone through a serious ordeal, and best thing I can say is eat. And, because your metabolism has changed and your body is trying to recuperate from the trauma it's been through. So just eat, order as much as you can eat as much as you can, have people bring in food, but eat. That's going to be the thing." And so I ate like a horse. I ordered everything I could.